Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Melo Meresco. We have another awesome guest today. We have Rebecca. She's a freelance web designer, so I'm super excited to learn more about how she started, what it requires to be a freelance web designer, and yeah, just so with that being said, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here. And how are you? And yeah,
I'm doing amazing, and thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here
oh,
today.
I'm super excited too. I'm super honored to like. I've seen your stuff, and it's pretty awesome. So let's dive in. So the first question is, how did you get into becoming a freelance web designer? What's like the backstory to it?
Yeah, so my villain origin story. I kind of started to learn how to code in high school.
Mm,
So I believe it was my sophomore year. I took a web design class, and that's kind of where everything got started.
mm,
I worked at Apple for a while, which that played
oh
like a
wow.
pretty big role in my journey and like
Yeah.
just learning the technologies that I'll be using. I used to teach classes at Apple, so that got me
Oh
like super
wow.
comfortable with the technology and like
Yeah.
computer and everything. I ended up studying cybersecurity in college, which
Mm.
was very interesting experience. I love cybersecurity, and it ended up not being what I wanted to do. I got my
Mm.
fancy corporate job after graduating college, and I like hyped it up, and I was so excited. And this was going to be like my first like step into the corporate world, and it was so boring. It was so absolutely boring for me as a creative person. Um,
Mm.
I skipped a part before that, but I started freelancing while I was in college. I got to work for an influencer and a fitness brand, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where, again, just got to like express my creativity in different
Yeah.
ways. So all of these things basically came together, and I ended up quitting my job 6 months into my very first corporate job and started
Oh
freelancing.
wow.
Really just like took a risk. I made sure I had enough to pay my rent and then
Mm.
was like, we're going to figure out the rest. And yeah, that's what got me here. Kind of a journey of like trying different creative outlets, studying
Yeah.
cybersecurity, and then putting those all together, and it ended up with web
Oh
development.
wow. How did you like got I guess like the courage or knew that you wanted that creativity part in what you were doing? Because it's not easy to like kind of say, oh yeah, let me quit my job after like 6 months I've been in a job.
Absolutely. Yeah, I made sure to start freelancing while I was at my like nice paying corporate job so that I wasn't
Mm,
jumping like cold turkey. Like I had
yeah.
at least like one or two clients going and I knew that I was capable of getting more. But
Mm,
um I don't want to sound dramatic, but I was like truly depressed at that. Like my corporate job, I was just looking at logs all day, and
oh wow.
cybersecurity holds a very special place in my heart. I still work with cybersecurity and with like other startups, but um, I think that was like the very first time where I had to admit that like, oh, like the money really isn't worth it. Like I'm so
Mm,
unhappy, and I need to do something where I at least
yeah.
feel like it's like purpose driven or I'm like making an impact, especially when you're working at like a massive company. It's really easy to feel like drowned out by like everything else
Yeah.
that's happening.
I could imagine. And then after you started, because you already had your like a few clients before you like quit your
Hmm.
job. So how was that freelance lifestyle after that?
It was definitely scary. I just signed a lease on like a very nice apartment
Oh
because I
wow.
was like expecting on having this like very like nice tech salary like straight out of college. Um, it was scary. I would say that again, blessed that I was able to like have my one or two clients. I was working for an influencer, so that was like a very
Mm,
helpful person to like have entered
yeah.
my life and a lot of opportunity came through there. But um I really just made myself go out into the community, like market myself like crazy. I did a few
Mm,
things for free and I just really going crazy with like reaching out to local businesses and offering what I can do. Of course, again, doing things for inexpensive and just building from
mm,
there.
yeah. And then how did you knew like were you watching videos, like what resources were you using to kind of like educate yourself? Because or and can I
Yeah.
add, where did you know anybody else who was doing freelance where you were able to ask?
That's a great
um
question. Yeah, because I definitely did. There was one designer in specific. Her name is Melissa Alam, or the name of her business is Alam Digital. Would like highly recommend checking her out. She has gorgeous, gorgeous work. But she was the first person that I met where I was like, oh my God, like this is a job. Like this is like a
mm,
whole viable career path. I
yeah.
don't have to go the typical corporate path. I can build my own company, build my own dream job.
Yeah.
And she definitely, I ended up like paying her for like a call just to like sit with her and ask her questions, pick her brain. And I
Oh
think that was like one of the final like nail in the coffin where I was like, okay, I can do this. Like,
yeah.
and then
No.
I took the jump. Yeah.
Yeah, because I could imagine, like, at least for me, it's always been like a mind. It's more like a mindset stuff where like, oh, it is possible. Like even like
Mm-hmm.
now, it's still like I'm still in between where I know it's possible like to do like freelance or like to have your own business and be successful, but it's just like those like limiting beliefs that kind of like
Yeah.
get you. So like speaking about that, like what were some like either limiting beliefs or obstacles that you faced during this the beginning of this journey and maybe now like now in the present, because I imagine there's always some obstacles, and then
Yeah.
how have you been able to either overcome them or learning about like those lessons through those obstacles.
I think at the beginning, it was just like the general doubt, like, is this even possible? Am I going to make enough money? Should I just stop while I'm ahead? Like all of those types of things.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of it was the imposter syndrome just came from like a lack of education. Like I think
Mm.
the best like defense for imposter syndrome is just to like educate yourself more and more and just know that you know what you're
Yeah.
talking about. But I'd say that was just the information, like the knowledge that I didn't have, and like stepping into a space where there are so many other freelance web designers, so it feels like, so much competition. But um really just pushing past that and just educating myself and then just like not listening to it. That definitely is what got me through the beginning. And then of course, I'm sure my family has received multiple phone calls for me crying and venting.
Oh.
So like a major shout out to them because I definitely could not have done it without them like listening and like talking me through everything. Even now I feel like I have imposter syndrome, even though I have
Mm.
like insane, like I've had really insane large clients and I've like
Oh.
built big sites. And like even then I think it's just because I'm not working on a team. It really is just me. It's not
Mm.
like it's a
Oh wow.
company name, like it's my name, like my
Yeah.
reputation that I'm putting out there when I do work. So it can still be a little intimidating, but I think I just realized that like all entrepreneurs are just figuring it out as we go. Like nobody knows what they're doing. And like the more I can like assure myself of that, like the easier it gets.
No, I agree. And I think another thing I've been noticing is like a lot of people say, oh, there's too much competition or stuff like that. But then once you start seeing other people's work, it's like some of them aren't as good, you could say, where it's like, I know I could do better, so why not do it? And that's something I've been seeing. And not just like in like the podcast, but like more like just general businesses. Like an
Hmm.
example is like in the food industry. Like there's so much competition, but once if you go to like I went to some taco restaurants where like they were like not that great, and if I knew
Hmm.
somebody that were good, and like I'll go and I wouldn't mind paying with whatever the price is as long as it's good, you know. So I think that goes with like any industry. So as long as your work is good and clients will come to you. But
Absolutely. And yeah, and especially like in the space that I'm in where it's design work, so I guess we have like more normal people. Tech has like the stereotype of like socially awkward, like,
mm,
tech, especially coming from like a cybersecurity space. I think one thing that has helped me a lot is that I'm a pretty personable person.
mm,
Customers like enjoy working with me. I can explain things well. We interact, we have fun. It's not like I'm just here like super technical
mm,
like brick wall, and it's people don't want to give you like money when they feel like they can't
mm,
trust you and talk to you. So
yeah,
I think that definitely like helps to just know that like even though there's tons of other people, I'm still myself and I'm still bringing,
mm,
yeah, that's
yeah.
what makes me different, what makes me stand out.
Yeah, because I could definitely feel like you're like a very sociable person, like someone who's like really easy to talk to, which is like really nice. Were you always like that? Like, have you always been like a very social, like I could even say like extroverted person, but I don't want to say that you're.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm extroverted, maybe like that happy balance, like extroverted introvert either. Like
Yeah.
definitely have like my time where I just want to like go home and like curl up and do nothing. But I started my YouTube channel back in 2015, so I think
Mm,
I would just like that started to get me comfortable with like creating content and
mm,
like just speaking early, even if I was like more comfortable on the internet than I was like on like in person at first. But
yeah.
um yeah, it's like a classic extroverted introvert. I won't say I
Excellent.
like fall into like either extreme.
All right, that makes sense. I feel like I don't know if like that's how it works, but like I used to be a very shy person, and
Hmm.
now I'm still shy and an introvert, but I'm trying to get out of my shell more. So,
Yeah.
but it's nice. It's a nice balance. A question that I had, or the next question I have is, how did you get into social media? Like, started creating content. Like, what made you start? When did you start? And like, how's the process been?
Yeah, so fun little backstory that's related. My grandpa from Germany, he filmed like our entire
Mm.
childhood. Like I have
Oh
CDs of
wow.
almost every single year of our lives, and it was just like I think the very first time I experienced vlogging like unintentionally. And so I started vlogging once I was like old enough and started learning how to
Mm.
do video editing again, like while I was in high school, maybe
Oh
like my
wow.
freshman year of high school is when I started. So there's lots of videos that are private because they're very embarrassing. But that's kind of how I got started. And I actually started sharing my journey through tech as I got older. And there just weren't a
Mm.
lot of women on the internet doing that. So my YouTube channel ended up growing pretty quickly.
Oh wow.
Um, Not crazy, but I definitely like built an entire community and that opened a lot of doors for me. Um,
Mm.
Another like pretty big part in my journey in this was this organization called Cyber Collective. And I still get to do work with them today, but it's essentially a company that helps people stay safe online. And we just take all of
Mm.
the like complex language that exists in the cybersecurity space
Yeah.
and break it down so that like even my grandma can understand and that like everybody's staying safe online. And we just make it fun in general.
Mm.
Normally cybersecurity training isn't something you would like think is fun. So, you know, we like make it more entertaining. So they also during the pandemic, I met this group of women and we like got to join in on this organization. And that was also like a really great like learning and practice experience for me
Mm.
because I got to make lots of content, make great connections, and that entire experience got me into the tech community, which got me
Mm.
started more on social media.
Social media. And how did the like you mentioned how like being a woman, it's like not seeing a lot in the tech. So how did that influence you? Like how were your classes in college? Like was it like only a few women? Like and how is it now? Do you see like a difference?
Yeah, it's definitely I feel like online it feels like there's so many more of
Mm.
us and then when I go
Yeah.
into places in person I'm like, "Oh no, like it's
No.
really not." But that was definitely a whole like just the whole experience in college. There's most of my classes, there's like maybe three women out of
Oh
like
wow.
50 total students. And then I had some great experiences with professors that would
Mm.
like purposely be like, oh, like you're the only woman here, like you answer the question. And it's like,
Oh
what is
wow.
wrong with you? Yeah. And then even on my internships, I've had like some very interesting comments made where it's just like, you don't think it exists until you experience it. And you're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, no, like this is
Oh
real. Like
wow.
it's definitely like a male dominated industry.
Mm.
But I think it just makes the community of women even closer and even much like stronger
Mm.
because we all know like what we're facing in the real
Yeah.
world.
You know, I think that yeah, that's like super important, and that goes back to like there was like this podcast I did a while ago where it's like you need to start creating more like people need to start creating more content, especially like women, because you don't
Mm-hmm.
see it, and people say like, oh, who cares about my story? But it's like it is important because there's again like you said, there's three people in your class, like three women in your class, so it's like we need to start educating and like learning and then like sharing our stories and all of that. But yeah, I think it's definitely really super important.
And
Um,
it can be, I feel like it can be intimidating because the internet is mean. And then
yeah.
I've definitely had like, I remember when I was in college making videos and this like grown man came and started yelling at me that I didn't provide enough information in my video. And I was like, I'm in college. Like, I understand that you're a professional in this field. Like, leave the information if you care so much. But it's
Right.
definitely interesting because there are those corners of the internet that just like do not want to see you win. But
Yeah.
you know, comes with
Have
the territory.
have you what like resources have you used to like kind of like help you mindset wise or like emotionally? Because you know, like you said, there's like judgmental people. There's sometimes like maybe not having enough likes can influence you for like even though we don't want to, like sometimes it does. So like what resource have you used to like be you could say emotionally okay or better than
Yeah,
okay?
I would say it's mostly talking to my friends that are also creating
Mm.
content, and then, you know, we can complain about like the crazy things that we see online. But um, in my like regular life, I definitely try to meditate. I try to
Mm.
journal, like especially breath work if I ever feel myself getting anxious. Like it's a fact that if you breathe slowly, your heart rate will
Yeah.
slow down, you know? So it's like if
Yeah.
you can control your breath, you can really like take control over your
Mm.
reactions, take control of your emotions, all of those things. So I'd say I definitely like lean heavily into the mindfulness space and just trying to like, you know when
Yeah.
to log out, know when it's like, okay, that was like enough internet for the day. Like, let me go
Mm.
touch some grass. Like, It's not real. So yeah, just a healthy balance of like just mindfulness practices and
Mm. Yeah. How did
talking.
you? Sorry.
No, I was gonna say that and talking to friends. Sorry.
Mm. How did you get into the mindfulness like space? And what were like some of the like limiting beliefs or beliefs that you kind of had to like start changing? Where you're like, oh yeah, this is not helping me. This is not useful. Like I need to start transforming this into like something positive.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that's just like coming to mind now, because I'm so young, I constantly felt intimidated when I was working with people older than me, which is often,
Mm.
obviously. And I think when you're at a company, it's a little different because they're like helping you like guide you through this
Mm.
entire experience. You might even have like a mentor you're assigned, and
Mm.
it's different when you have your own business and it's just
Yeah.
you. So I think that that would probably be like another limiting belief that I really had to work through is that no, like I, even though I'm young, like I have all this knowledge, I have all this information,
Mm.
I know what I'm doing. And then, even like using that as an affirmation, like I have value to provide, like I know what I'm doing, I'm constantly
Mm.
growing, like
Yeah.
there's room for improvement. And even if I make mistakes, like I'm only learning from it.
Mm.
Um, and then same thing with as I mentioned earlier, the Cyber Collective organization. A big part of that company is digital mindfulness and like
Mm.
in cybersecurity, just being mindful, like be mindful of what you click on, be mindful, like,
Mm.
does this seem real? Are they trying to
Yeah.
scam you? Like just being aware of all the things that are happening and then just like slowing down. We're like really big on like unplugging, like taking intentional time away from the internet to like process and all those. So
Oh.
that also played like a pretty large role in me just like integrating it more into my
Mm.
work, into my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's cool. And it's cool like they're like adding that into like what you're learning. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And I guess another question I have is like with the freelance website designer, like what exactly do you do? And like if someone wants to get into that, like what were some of the skills or strengths that you like it's like really important that you start getting into it.
Yeah. So, what I typically do, I work with primarily small businesses, and then I have a few like nonprofit organizations. But
Mm.
I know a really big misconception that people think is that I have to build websites from scratch, and I'm like doing this like
Mm.
insane heavy lift every single time I build a site. But I built my website on Squarespace and Shopify. So I sell like
Mm.
Squarespace and Shopify websites. So it's just
Oh.
e-commerce and like informational websites essentially.
Mm.
Um, so if I like have a new client, we'll sit down, talk about our goals together, see like which
Mm.
platform fits best for what they're doing. How can we make the user journey as simple as possible and like, just easy to go through. I also studied
Mm.
UX design, so really
Mm.
big into like accessibility, making sure that everybody
Mm.
can enjoy your website, not just like able-bodied people. And then, just in general,
Mm.
figuring out all the information from them. I take 2 weeks of designing and then 2 weeks of building, and then we launch their site.
Oh wow.
I like building on Shopify and Squarespace because it's super easy for my clients to manage, especially for small businesses. They don't have thousands of dollars to constantly hire a developer. So I want to
Yeah.
put them on something that can grow with them.
Mm.
But tools that helped me, if you wanted to do freelance web development, honestly, all you really need is to know HTML and CSS. And you can build an entire business off of that. You don't need to know any of the like
Oh
crazy
wow.
coding that goes into JavaScript. Um, there are 2 courses or 3 courses that I took. There is a designer, her name is Square Stylist, and
Mm.
she does a course on Squarespace. It's like $3,000. It's worth every penny. I made my money back real quick with everything that she taught. And then she made another course for Shopify. It's also 3,000. Again, you don't need both at the same time, but whichever one you choose, like
Yeah.
almost guaranteed you will make your money back. It's pretty insane, very
Oh wow.
valuable. She gives you like scripts that you can send to your clients, like a way to manage your projects. She gives you like a code toolkit that
Yeah.
will like help you just be faster and more efficient in coding. But she also teaches you how to code on these platforms and how to do
Mm.
custom edits so that you're not,
Oh
so
wow.
you can distinguish your projects and just stand out
Yeah.
from every other template that you might see online. And then there is another course on Udemy. I
Mm.
think her name is Angela, the teacher. She has a web development course, and I took her course as well because I did want to learn more of the like technical
Mm.
JavaScript, like nitty gritty, what's going on behind the scenes. So if you are interested in going more into like the development side versus the design side, I would highly, highly recommend that Udemy
Mm.
course by Angela. Yeah.
Angela. All right, that's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, personally, I don't want to be a web designer, but like sometimes there's people who like, how do I get started?
Yeah.
And again, because there might be not enough resources, or I don't know what would the problem be, but there's always an excuse. Like now they have it like here, like there's some courses out here, and is would that be so? You're I don't know. I'm gonna say like, oh, college is bad, but like, is it necessary if you already have like these courses?
I would say, oh, it's so rough. I'm gonna say no. Like if you like straight out, if you just wanted to become a freelance web designer, like no, you don't have to go to college for that. You can definitely figure it out via like
Mm,
these courses, or honestly,
yeah,
you could figure it out for free online. These courses just like help you not have to like run all over the
self-serve.
place to
Yeah.
like find the information. But um I don't regret my degree, and which is hard because I definitely, student loans, all those wonderful things that came with it. Like, I still
Yeah.
don't regret the degree. I definitely like got a lot of cool opportunities out of it, and I
Mm,
still get to like use my degree. I think it's the reason why I got into
mm,
coding. So I think it really depends. I think if you want to go the corporate route, it is good to have a degree because that environment still really values
mm,
degrees and they like need to
yeah.
see that for like career progression. You want to become a
Mm,
manager, they want to see a master's degree, for
oh wow.
example. But if you plan on owning your own business, it really does not matter,
Yeah. So true.
unfortunately.
Oh, that's like an awesome like option to have, knowing that you don't need to spend so much money on tuition to get a degree, and
Yeah.
even though you're gonna be doing your own business, so that's nice. Um, with your job, I know you mentioned and how you get to travel more. So how did that get started? What were some cool places that you've been able to visit, and maybe any like cool stories that you get to share or got to share?
Yeah. So I feel like I have my most like fun, most recent story would be from the Cyber Collective organization. I
Mm-hmm.
was just in New York earlier this year
Oh wow.
for we held an event. It was Web3 for creatives. So Tazeen Khan, she's the owner of the organization, the mother of Cyber Collective. She invited like tons of really cool people from like HBO,
Oh,
Google, like all these
oh
like
wow.
people in the industry, and we got to present to them on like how can we make Web3 like a safe space for creatives, or how do creatives use this technology in this like ever changing field. And that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I got to help like create the content that was taught,
Oh.
and again I got to stay in the penthouse in Manhattan, and it
Oh
was like that was a
wow.
really fun experience. So that was one recently, and then another project I got to help in with recently was a company called One Community Social Services, and it was a nonprofit that helps Afghan refugees in the DC, like Virginia area. So I got to fly out
Mm.
to Virginia, like take
Oh wow.
photo and video of their warehouse, and then I
Yeah.
built their website, and it was just really cool. I did headshots. It
Yeah.
was like an entire like weekend experience, but
Oh
it was
wow.
just incredible to, I think, with the Afghan refugees, you hear about this issue, but you don't see it
Mm.
often. So it was crazy to like actually see and meet the people that like this work is impacting and helping.
Yeah.
So those are two really like recent projects that were
Mm.
very exciting for me.
Oh, that's awesome. How, because you mentioned you were part of the first one, you're part of the community, and the other ones, how are you able to? How did you find out about them, or is it with the same thing?
Honestly, like same community, and it's
Mm.
crazy because I met that person on Instagram, and it
Mm.
wasn't we had never met in person until she hired me to fly out and do
Oh
photo
wow.
video on her website. So we knew each other from like thousands of meetings and Zoom calls, but it
Oh
was
wow.
really cool to like meet in person. Definitely like shed a few tears when we left because it's crazy how your internet friends really are like real friends.
Mm.
It's I don't know. It was extra validating because I think sometimes you can like get in your head and be like, oh, I don't really actually
Mm.
know this person, but then you meet them and like it's beautiful, and we would be best friends if we lived together. So,
Oh.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was
that's awesome. And how did you get started with traveling? How, because you said you also your clients, they help you out with that, or like you have to go shoot content and stuff like that. How did that started, or when did it started?
I think that would have probably gotten started more so in college. When I worked for the
Mm.
influencer, we would
Oh wow.
constantly like not constantly, but we would frequently like travel places just for shoots, like bring
Mm.
whatever like product she's working on and I'll take
Yeah.
pictures. So
Oh wow.
that's kind of where I got started. I would say like photography isn't like my main passion. I would definitely like I love web development more than I love photography, so I'll like outsource like to one of my friends that's also a photographer, videographer pretty often. But
Mm.
that's where I got started in it. I think
Oh,
there's once you build a relationship with somebody, there's typically a lot of opportunity for travel. It just takes a second to like build the trust. Obviously,
mm.
they don't want to travel with somebody that's crazy either. So once you get to know your people and you have like a solid relationship, I feel like the opportunities definitely just like
Definitely come.
arise. Yeah, I think it's also like in a manifestation sense, like if you're open to things, like the universe will
Ew.
provide. So it truly, it's like whatever you're open to, write it down, like call it
Yeah.
out, like ask for it, and like opportunities will come.
No, yeah. That's so true because like a little like with the trip to Mexico that I did recently, like I'm
Hmm.
undocumented, so I can't travel at all. But I applied for my advanced parole a few probably beginning of this year, and I thought I was gonna travel until like the end of the year. I had little to no savings, so I'm like, when I found out, I was like, how am I gonna do this? Because I really wasn't expecting it, but I wanted to go to Mexico for quite a
Hmm.
while now. So it was pretty awesome. Like the manifestation, I was like writing it down, like I want to go to Mexico and all of that. My meditations, it's a
It
visualizations, which is
matters. It matters. It's
it
real. Like,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, and now I was able to go for about 3 weeks. So it was such an awesome experience, like being with my family, who I haven't seen like in 18 years, and then I don't
That's
even remember
awesome.
them because I left when I was 4. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely manifestation. It's a weird thing to understand, but once you start seeing it, it's like it's just unreal. Like I still
Yeah.
can't believe I won. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's like the coincidences really aren't coincidences,
Yeah.
especially yeah, when you put that work in, like the mental work
Yeah.
behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. Um, something about speaking about manifesting. Have you manifested like any other like cool stuff or like when did you start learning about manifestation?
Um, So I grew up, I don't know, without like going into my entire like upbringing, I grew up in a, like a super Christian household, like my
Mm.
entire life, like Black
Oh wow.
gospel church, the full whole 9 yards. And then as I got older, I just kind of like deconstructed and moved away from
Mm.
that. So I feel like which is like a common story for a lot of young people. So
Yeah.
I think that's like where I kind of like naturally like I was like, okay, like
Mm.
I definitely believe in like supernatural. Don't know if I want to like participate in this organization, and that's kind of I'd say
Yeah.
my sister's the one that kind of like started to get us into that. So um yeah, I think it was honestly like my oldest sister. She kind of started introducing us into like meditation, and from the like
Mm.
religious background I came from, anything that like was meditation was like bad and like evil
Oh
and like
really?
demonic and all these
Oh
things.
wow.
So it was just like yeah, it was just like learning and unlearning for like lack of better words. And I think like the more I started practicing it, the more like peace it would bring me, and the more
Mm.
I like, obviously like saw things actually coming to fruition.
Yeah.
I think like this business that I built was like a manifestation. I didn't, yeah, I could have never like thought that it would get as big as it is, but I just knew that I wanted to build something on my own. I knew that I was capable, and I also always had the thought in the back of my head that like sometimes you have to build your dream job. Like sometimes it
Mm.
doesn't exist yet, whether that's at a
Yeah.
company or you're like starting your own company. It's like sometimes it's just something you have to build. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's also because you keep like with manifestation or just like believing in yourself and like going after what you want, you start breaking so many beliefs that you had about life, about yourself, and it's
Hmm.
pretty nice. Like, and once you start being constant, and even if they're like small things, like those small, it's like the compound effect. Like once you start like being constant and working on yourself, like there's that exponential thing, and it's pretty awesome to kind of like see it come into fruition. So
Yeah.
yeah. Let's go into the I like having money conversations in the podcast. So let's talk a bit about like how your relationship was with money, maybe before you even got like before you got your corporate job, and then we'll go from like different the sections. So let's
Yeah.
start before you had your corporate job, like during college.
So what was money like for
Hey,
my
yeah,
perception
your
and
perception, your
yeah.
beliefs, all of that.
So, my I feel like more backstory, but it's necessary. My dad grew up in like a very rough situation, like super impoverished, was integrated
Mm.
into white schools, like
Oh wow.
Mississippi, like extremely racist. So he had definitely had a lot of like money trauma that I think that he like unintentionally passed on to us. He was like extremely frugal, we were like well off, but like would never buy a single thing, like still is driving like a car that they no longer
Oh
manufacture
wow.
because he like refuses to buy a new one. Like,
Oh
so
wow.
coming out of high school and then like having to finally deal with money myself, I just constantly had like, I don't want to call it poverty mentality. I'm trying to think of the word. Just I would just constantly feel like I don't have enough, like I'm going to lose everything,
Mm,
like I need to get as much as I possibly can. And I think
yeah.
that also encouraged me. I finished college in 3 years because I was like, get me
Nice.
to a job where I can make money. Like I need to like make like a real income. And then yeah, so honestly, probably wasn't the healthiest at first. I did have like my job at Apple, which like paid very well, but even
Yeah.
then, like I think it was just constantly feeling like I didn't have enough and that I needed to make more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
That
And
was
then
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
before, so it was like a very like frugal type, like in Spanish, like it's like they say go that, so it's like you it kind of like cheap, but like
Hmm.
you don't buy stuff even though you know you need it. So after you got, so before that was like in college, and then when you got your corporate job, how was that relationship with money?
I like immediately experienced lifestyle inflation down to like the fancy apartment that I got because
Oh.
I was like, oh, I find because they gave me just an I don't know. I love talking about money. Obviously, this is what this whole section segment is about. Like got $100,000 job
Oh
straight out of
wow.
college, so it was like a lot of money that I didn't know how to deal
Yeah.
with like right away, especially I don't know, maybe I was making like 30 something before, like while I was in college and
Oh
then going
wow.
straight to 100,000. It was just, I don't think
It's a
I knew
big
how to
jump.
like manage it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I spent it, a lot of
Oh
it.
my god.
Again, like very nice apartment. So obviously like immediately have like a super
Oh
expensive
wow.
rent. And then I don't know, just like shopping, honestly, like finally feeling like, oh, like I had like while I was in college, I had like an Amazon wish list of all the things I wanted to buy when I had money. So I
Yeah.
like
Oh wow.
like went crazy and like bought all the things I finally wanted. And then when it was time, like 6 months in, when I like realized I was like I hated it, I was like, oh my God, like I'm not gonna stay here. Like I have to figure out something else. So
Yeah.
um yeah, it I think it was just a learning lesson for me. Like one, don't say yes to things just for money. And two, also just like don't that lifestyle creep, that lifestyle inflation
Mm,
will come like real quick. You have to really be intentional about like not just being smart about your money and not just
mm.
wasting it on things just because you can.
Yeah. How did you start learning about like becoming financially educated and like
Yeah,
yeah.
I would say it's a mix of like Instagram and YouTube again. I
Mm.
love YouTube. So there's a guy named Caleb Hammer and he does
Caleb.
financial audits. I would highly recommend his
Mm.
videos. He like keeps me in check. He makes like 2 or 3 videos a week and he just goes over, he invites people onto the podcast and goes over their entire
Oh
financial
wow.
situation, like lays out the debt, goes through checking account. And
Yeah.
it's like a really good like reminder of like okay like let me not like spend money on
Mm.
Amazon or like any like eating out all these some things. And then on Instagram I was lucky enough that through my tech community I found a lot of like women in their 30s that were pretty like well into their careers and like
Mm.
had a pretty good grasp on their money and
Yeah.
they were sharing resources about like investing and
Mm.
like putting money aside for retirement. So
Yeah.
through those two things I started to like understand like okay like I want like an emergency fund, like I don't want like
Mm.
a car maintenance thing to like completely throw off my entire
Yeah.
financial situation. So now I like have an emergency fund and that even that alone like makes me feel so much better about like navigating and traveling and just
Mm.
doing anything in the world. So I'd say again Instagram and YouTube for those
Instagram.
two parts. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think like it's super important because like it goes back with like how you say you were like spending all this money, and because they don't educate us, or either our
Hmm.
parents, society, whatever it is, like it makes us make these rational or irrational decisions. So it's, yeah, it's definitely important. Were you learning about this while like maybe like towards the end of like when you were in your corporate job, or when did you started?
Yeah, I would say yes. Like I was aware of the things that I needed to
Mm,
do, but especially like once I left my job, like I just simply wasn't making that much money at the beginning. I think I was making
mm,
like 3,000 a month, which like when your rent is like, 1,500, that's like half of it, like or
yeah.
whatever. So I just like was mostly I don't know. I think I just like didn't think about it because I was like, I'm just trying to build this and make more. Like I knew the
Mm,
situation wasn't me leaving cheaper.
yeah.
Like the solution was like me making more money. So
Mm, yeah.
um uh Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if I answered that question.
Yeah.
I like lost my train of thought. I like lost
No, you're good. Yeah, and because I asked that, like, oh, like, were you doing that before and after? Because then, how did that influence? How did that influence? Now that you were doing freelance, because
Yeah.
the income fluctuates, all that, like planning. I believe you have to plan more, like,
Hmm.
because again, the income can fluctuate. So how is that? How did that influence your relationship with money, and like, what are you doing now to kind of like be financially stable? You could say.
Yeah. So again, like once I left my job, it was definitely like reality check, like, okay, I need to like get things together. And I did have
Yeah.
my era of like, I'm just trying to survive, like I'm not thinking about it. And then like,
Mm-hmm.
once I was at a better place with freelancing, had more clients, like having a higher monthly average.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing was an emergency fund, honestly. Caleb Hammer, that YouTuber, talks about it a lot, but like having like $10,000 saved just in case anything happens is like very necessary in the world that
Mm-hmm.
we live in today,
Yeah.
especially like with pandemics and just people getting laid off out of nowhere. You just
Mm-hmm.
never know what's going to happen. So,
Yeah.
um, I think it definitely made me like be a little bit more serious about saving. Like you said, like the income can fluctuate. I had like a month where I made like 15,000 this
Oh
year, and then I
wow.
had a month where I like made four, so
Yeah.
I just like have to like save so that for the months I do make less, that I'm not like struggling or having to like
Mm-hmm.
go into debt or anything along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, biggest thing, have an emergency fund. I would recommend that to absolutely everyone. Just like save an emergency fund. It'll make your life so much easier.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. And I have a question with like the $15,000 that you made, or
Yeah.
because for me, I still feel like it's crazy that people make that amount of money in a month. So how did that, whether that was your biggest month or not, like how did it feel to like kind of see like holy crap, I made $15,000 this month or whatever
It's pretty
other.
crazy. It's pretty crazy, and it makes me never want to go back to a corporate job ever again. Because I now know like what I'm capable of. Like if I go back to a company, the salary has to be crazy because I know that I'm like capable of making like this income on my
Yeah.
own. I will say like one big thing with freelance, if anybody listening is considering it, like 30% of everything you make goes to taxes. So it
Texas.
is like less than, go ahead
Yeah.
and like take 5,000 out of that for taxes. But it feels incredible, and it just feels like super empowering to know that like, oh, like I did that by myself. And I think that's just another thing I like about freelance, especially like with the money conversation. I think it's like really easy. I don't know, for my when I was in my corporate job, I would like want to do all these things, but like, oh, like I don't have enough money for this. Where like
Mm.
with freelance, like oh, I'll just like take on one more client and then like
Mm.
that's paid for. Like it just
Yeah.
feels more flexible.
Yeah, you have more options for sure.
Yeah.
How so you started, so that experience was awesome, and then how do you deal with the when the what's it called, when the months are kind of low, like do you still do the same thing where like you just get more clients, or is it just like it's okay because I already saved kind of like the I have a backup, you could say, like.
Yeah, I would say at this point it's pretty fine. I'm in my second year, or like year, I guess like year now, 2.5 years now into
Oh
my
wow.
business. So I'm at a point now where like I'm pretty much fine. Like even on like
Mm.
my down months, I'm like doing pretty good, so I don't have to like dip
Mm.
into anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when it was that way, I definitely was just like on my low months, I'd like pull whatever I needed for savings, and then
Mm.
like put it back when I have it again. But blessed to say now I'm at like a really good point where every month is pretty good. So
Yeah, no, that's
coasting,
awesome.
coasting.
That's awesome. And I was gonna ask this question where with the business side of this, because
Hmm.
sometimes they say like go after your passion, like whatever you're into, and like in this case it's like web design, right? But then become having your own business, it's not as simple. I mean, I don't know, it's not as simple. Like you gotta learn like different things, like managing your expenses, um
Hmm.
laws, strategy, I don't know, like text, I don't know what.
Yeah.
I'm still like learning about those stuff. But how is that for you in the beginning? How is it now, like that balance of like doing what you want, but also knowing that you have to run your business?
Yeah. Um, so I mean, partially I'm very lucky because I'm in a field that is very in need. Like everybody needs my
Mm.
services. So for
Yeah.
a certain extent, like it makes that part easier because like I don't have to like I mean, I sometimes I'd have to find clients, but for the most part, it's like referrals. Like people are finding me because they
Mm.
like need my services.
Yeah.
But Let me see where I want to go with that. Trying to think. um I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question one more time? I feel like I'm losing my
Yeah,
train of thought.
what
The
was
business
the
side.
business
Sorry.
side?
Yeah.
How did you learn?
It's still early. So for the business side, again, it's like much more intimidating at the beginning than it
Yeah.
is for me now. At the
Mm,
beginning, you're like just thinking of all the legal things, like, am I going to
yeah.
get sued by the state of Texas because I didn't like file something
Yeah.
correctly? Just to share this information here again, in case anybody's listening, if you do want to start your own business, you can do something called a DBA, which stands for doing business as.
Mm,
And that's kind of like the first step if you're like still testing it out, but you want to be like legally recognized by the state you're in. You would just go to your like county clerk. It's like a $17
mm,
application, and then you're
oh,
registered to do business. After that is like when you were getting to like LLC things, which as of
mm,
December, like I officially have my LLC. I
oh
started
wow.
getting clients that were a little too big for me to join as like I need to like some legal protection. I
Oh
can't just
wow.
like enter these contracts as a person. So
Mm,
I would say like for the first year and a half, I was just registered as a DBA. And that was really good
mm,
for me. And then, once things got serious and I was like, okay, like I'm doing this, this is my career. Like then I
yeah.
went and got the legal protection that I needed. But truly,
Oh
there's so
wow.
many resources online. I hate to say that because I feel like that's like everybody's answer, but it's all there. It's really just a matter of searching through it, and it's not fun because I've had my days where I'm like reading through the IRS's website to see how I send like paperwork to people that I've hired, and I'm like, this is
Mm,
awful. Like, ended up hiring an accountant. I think you also start to like realize the value in like hiring other
mm,
people to do the things
yeah.
that you're not good at. This I think tomorrow actually I finally hired an executive assistant, so like
Oh
that's
wow.
huge to like take some of the like workload off of my plate, and also looking into getting a full-time, not full-time, but like a consistent accountant for me to work
Yeah.
with. There's definitely like a lot of things and even more legal filings that I could do to save money on taxes. There's a thousand things, but
Yeah.
truly like one step at a time. If anybody is listening and they would like to start a business, I would just recommend starting with a DBA and like don't get
DB.
overwhelmed because there's people to help, and yeah, you can go down so many rabbit holes and it's not worth it. Like, so just start simple, one step at a
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like making a list of like what you need to do. At least for me, that's what I do. I make a list, and then from there, if there's like little steps I need to make within that like bullet point, then I like
Yeah.
start writing it down to make it like easier and more digestible. Like okay, I get to kind of like making it atomical, like really tiny.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's if you look at like start business, like that's an
Yeah,
overwhelming task versus like go register at the county. You're
yeah.
like, okay, I can do that. Like I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely makes it easier. And I don't know which book I read, but it was pretty much like that. Like to make it as no, it was a podcast from Jay Shetty, and he was like, make it as simple where you could like make do that step at that moment. So
hmm
that's kind of like why I started making those lists. I had a question with the hiring, where
Yeah.
how is that experience? Because there's this course, I guess you could say, where like they talk about how a lot of people don't really like, a lot of business owners don't like hiring. So for you, how is that experience?
Yeah, I think so obviously I don't know exactly what that one was referencing, but a lot of times they're encouraging people to use contractors instead of full-time employees because
Mm,
with a full-time employee you have to like adhere to all of these laws, and it's a lot harder to fire somebody if they're a
mm,
full-time employee versus if they're
a
like just a
contractor.
contractor.
Yeah.
So for small businesses especially, like hiring a full-time employee is like a very serious commitment, so most people aren't doing that. They're just hiring contractors. But I have one other friend that was pretty close to me that used to work at Apple with me that also started a web development business.
Mm,
So he like luckily shared a lot of forms with me that he would use to like vet people. And then
mm,
right now, the executive assistant, as an example, she has worked with people that are much more important than me. So it was like really
oh
easy
wow.
decision for me to say yes. Like I trust you. Like I'm sure that you know what you're doing, but it can be scary to let people in. Even like with me getting this assistant, it's really scary to like hand off my emails because I've like
Mm.
done it all. Everybody's been communicating with me, but it's just like not sustainable for me to keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's hard to hand off and like delegate that task, but you like have to know at some point like you're only hurting yourself by not hiring and like getting
Yeah.
other people on board. Like even now I need another me. I'm like actively looking for another web designer to partner with because it's
Oh
like
wow.
there's too much work for just one person. I need like an
Yeah.
agency.
Yeah, no, and that's it. Kind of goes back with like with attachment. Like we at least this is a conversation I was having yesterday. Like where we tend to get attached to the things that, and we want to be in control of the things that
Hmm.
we like are doing. But then at some point we have to let go, and letting go in this case is hiring people, which is not an easy step to do, but something that's necessary, especially if you want to grow
Yeah.
our business. So yeah, it's definitely
Yeah, and you can't be good at everything. As much as I would
yeah.
love to learn 3D animation in my free time, that's like something that probably just isn't going to happen in this lifetime. So it's
Mm,
like one of those things where I'm like, okay, like let's just hire a pro. There's so many
yeah.
websites like Fiverr and Upwork where you can find people like nearby
Mm,
or international, however you're wanting to work. And
yeah.
yeah, there's always someone that knows more.
Now that we're talking about like how you need to hire people and so to have more time, like what have you been doing now to kind of have that balance of like not having to work the whole day and or not like having that boundary of like having that balance in work life and like work and life.
Yeah, I would say for me, because I really will work like any hour of the day. I hate having a fixed schedule and I love being able to work
Mm.
randomly. So I can't say that I have like a super healthy like I only work in the mornings or something. Like sometimes it's like I didn't work all day and then at night I'm like okay like now I'll start like but as far as like knowing when to ask for help, that's where I'm like sometimes like I love doing photography, but sometimes I'm like sometimes I just need to hire somebody else to do it
Mm.
because they're either like better than me or they
Yeah.
can do it faster or
Mm.
whatever. They have like special equipment
Yeah.
or me getting an assistant right now. Like it took me I should have gotten this assistant like a year ago, but I've again just been
Oh
holding on
wow.
to these tasks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I fully answered that question. But
Yeah, no, it's a definitely an experience or like a process that we
yeah.
keep on learning. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Like even now for me, I'm still trying to go back to my routine of like waking up early and trying to figure out what I have to do because I don't know, it's definitely a learning experience
I will
throughout this whole
say,
thing.
yeah, the one thing that I do try to do, like I will try to not take calls after 3 p.m., like as an example, because I know
Mm,
that in the afternoons I love to be lazy. So like that's a boundary that I'll set, or oftentimes like I don't text my clients. Like you will not find me giving my number to a client because
mm,
that's just like a boundary. I don't need you like texting and calling my personal phone, like you can
yeah,
email me. Like it's also nothing is an
mm,
emergency also with what I'm doing. Like we're
yeah.
not saving the world making websites and like I care so much about the websites that I'm making, but I'm not like, doing nuclear science or
Yeah.
anything like life changing. So like knowing that like not feeding into urgency, I think that's like the biggest
Mm,
thing. Like urgency culture, like
yeah.
this hustle culture, I don't have to like be in it in order to have a successful business, essentially.
Yeah, no, and it's awesome because you get to set your boundary. How did you start setting your boundaries, or how did you knew which ones to set? Like, yeah.
For me, like the phone, like texting was like one of the very first ones because at first I started with like, oh, like just
Mm.
text me anytime, and then they would, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, I don't like that. I do not like that at all. So I think it's really trial and error. Like
Mm.
somebody
Yeah.
crosses the boundary, you're like, okay, like I didn't know that was a boundary, but like let me go
Yeah.
establish that now. And then I'm like, hey, like actually just email me, and then I'll get back to you. Like,
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
yeah, that's super important, and I think that's important what you said, like trial and error, because sometimes we don't even know what our limits are, like what we want to set
Hmm.
as a boundary. So yeah, definitely trial and error is an important one. Before we get to the last two questions, is there
Yeah.
like any other lessons that you've learned, whether it's like in web designer or in your business or in your personal life, where it's like it's important to mention? You think we're like I wish I would have learned this since the beginning, or done since the beginning.
I don't know if this is like a clear lesson, but I would say the biggest thing, like biggest takeaway that I've gotten from my journey of freelancing so far is that there's truly so many more possibilities than you're even like thinking
Mm-hmm.
about. Like you really have to whatever like God, the universe, whatever you believe, like has so much more in store for you than you could possibly like ever imagine. Like
Mm-hmm.
I when I was thinking about my career when I was in high school and like just dreaming about like my like corporate job because that's all I was like taught to like aspire to. I never really considered all the other possibilities
Yeah.
that could possibly happen. And again, I have had like my first $20,000 website, which is like a crazy experience. And like that's something I would have never guessed would happen on my own. Like I
Yeah.
just don't limit yourself. I think that's like the biggest lesson. You never
Mm.
know what's going to happen. I would just like expect to be surprised by like the universe, God, whatever. Like expect to
Expert.
be like, yeah, blown away because you're gonna leave yourself open for so much more than you're like limiting yourself to based on like what we've seen in the world, what we're taught to
Yeah.
aspire to.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely, I really like how you said expect to be surprised. That's gonna be now
Hmm.
my affirmation, my mantra right
It's a
now.
good one,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is.
And
Expect to
then
be surprised.
I always like keep these little stickers on like everything you can imagine is real.
I
So it's
have
like, yeah.
I have my posters right in front of me too.
Yeah, I keep them like little like affirmations all around me because it's like, especially like yeah, if you can imagine it, you can make it happen. Like it's really up to
Yeah.
you and what you want.
Yeah, yeah, definitely like be and it goes back to manifestation. Like if anybody's listening to, like definitely like go into like the law of attraction. There's like further laws with not just
Hmm.
the law of attraction, so definitely like be checking them out. Um the last two question, it kind of the first one that I'm gonna ask kind of like relates to this one, but it's
Okay.
like for those people, for those who want to start a business, who want to start a career, like a side hustle, whatever it is, or that big change, but then they feel like they don't deserve that change, they don't feel like they're capable of, like what would be that little pep talk. And again, it kind of relates to what we were just talking
Yeah.
about, but
Well, yeah, partially relates, but I think you have to there's so much growth in being uncomfortable. I have had my fair share of projects that ended up so awful, but they're like, you have to get past the bad stuff to get to the good
the
stuff,
good
like,
stuff.
regardless of what you're doing. So, like, when I was a videographer, like, I've made some horrible, horrible videos where I'm like, I cannot believe I charged somebody like money for this. Even websites, like, now I'm like
Oh
happy with
wow.
everything I make, but I've definitely like, don't
Yeah.
be discouraged if like it's not amazing, right
Mm.
away, because it's not going to be
Yeah.
amazing, like when you're
Yeah.
first getting started. It's just like a natural part of the process, and the faster that you can get through the bad, the faster that you can
Mm.
get to the good. And I'd say like advice for getting started, really tap into your local community, like wherever you
Mm.
are, find the small businesses and work with them.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs love working with entrepreneurs.
Oh
So
really.
absolutely, yeah, I've definitely we all like want to support each other because all of us are like, defying the odds and not having a
Mm.
normal job and
Yeah.
like doing it on our own. So it's like we all want to like support this community of business
Oh
owners.
wow.
So definitely like go to other business owners, go to those events where it could be
Mm.
like, I go to an event here in Omaha that I found where it's like women and entrepreneurs, and I got to
Oh
find
wow.
really cool clients here. I got clients
Yeah.
out of just going to those events and networking. So just put yourself out there, talk to people,
Mm.
offer to do things for free if you're just getting started, and then, start to charge
Yeah.
slowly. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, awesome advice. And then the last question is, throughout this whole journey of freelance, or maybe even before, where kind of led you to freelance, what were those like awesome experiences where you were like how we were talking about, like holy crap, I can't believe this happened to me, or this
Hmm.
event happened, or like whatever the case might be. Like what were some of those top experiences you're like, holy crap?
I would say selling a $20,000 website was like a very, like, much so a highlight for me. Um, like getting a check for $10,000 is crazy, and you're like, wow, you're like, like, and this is, that was definitely like, it just felt like all of the labor, all of the work, because it wasn't until about 2 years in where that happened, but
Mm,
like all of the work is like finally worth it. And it
yeah,
happened like relatively fast. Like 2 years is not a long time
yeah,
to get to a point where you're like able to pull in clients like that. And
yeah.
then I think also traveling, every time I get to
Mm,
travel and like be somewhere where I'm working with a client, I'm always like, this is surreal. Like, this is my dream job. Like, little me would be freaking out right now knowing
mm,
what I'm like actively doing for
yeah.
work. So I think whenever you do have those wins, my sister taught me this too, like also in line with the whole manifestation thing, celebrate your wins, like, but like
Mm.
really celebrate them, like jump up and down, like scream, like let your brain remember the feeling of like what
Mm,
you're doing right now so that it can attract more. Yeah,
yeah,
I would say that would be like, those are the big moments that I'm like have to extra celebrate, and they're just also like
yeah.
super impactful. Like, I'm doing it, like it's actually happening.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to like it allows you to open yourself more to like the possibilities, because
Yeah,
right now it was a $20,000 job, or yeah, really a
yeah,
job, and
the
then
client, yeah.
a client, And then, well, in the future, it could be more, or it could be like 25, 30,000. Like who knows? And it's crazy because now you know what that level was, and it could go higher. So
Yeah, and it's crazy for me to be like only 2 years in. This is what I was able to do. Like imagine
yeah.
like 2 years from now, like what will I be doing? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Do you have any other like something you want to say before we end this podcast episode, or?
Yeah, I guess like my final closing remark. You're so capable of doing everything you absolutely want to do. Please do not limit yourself just because of like what we're told to do or that there's a specific path that you have to follow. Like regardless of where you are, there's so much room for you to like make it your own and just like make it fit to you. So sending you all love. Like, you got this. You got
You know, that's awesome, and that's something like I feel like everybody wants to hear. Like yeah, you got this. Like, it's maybe it's something that we don't really hear often. So when somebody tells us like, oh yeah, we do got this, like it hypes us up. So yeah,
There's
that's
no
awesome.
limits. Yeah.
There's no limits. That's awesome, and thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. For those who are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to give us a review, because that really supports our podcast. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share. I think those are the 4 ones. And because again, it supports the podcast. And yeah, with that being said, Rebecca, thank you so much again for being here. And for those who are listening, watching, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.